everybody, to the Old Gold Show with you as always. I'm your host, Andrew Ledman.
And I'm Casey Bartley from Boiler Upload Rivals Network.
And I'm co-manager over at Hammer and Rails. And today, we've got a nice two-part. I'm cutting you off before you can say anything.
I know.
I messed up the intro a bunch of times before we got this one in the can. So
you kind of even messed this one up too.
I did. So I messed it up 3 times. I'm moving past it. We're going.
We'll do it live.
That's right. Okay, Bill. So we've got a kind of a two-parter here, something a little different. Casey and I are going to be with you in the first half. We're going to talk about Zach Edey, kind of where he stands.
Wait, who is Bill?
Bill O'Reilly. That's where the Do It Live thing comes from.
Hold on. You telling me he did it before Jed Bartlett?
Yeah.
That's
pretty sure.
Is it?
Yeah, because that was back when he was on like
just out of us two. If we're gonna say that, you're not gonna mention the West Wing.
I mean, I guess, but it's not what I think of first. But anyway, moving on. We're gonna take a look at Zach Edey, just kind of where he is at as far as scoring records at Purdue, rebounding records at Purdue, but then also kind of talk about him in a bigger picture context of where he stands in Purdue history. And then we're going to take a break. We'll come back. I will be gone. And Casey is going to have a special guest. Do you want to tell him who it is, or you just want to have him be surprised?
Oh, yeah. Boiler in the Stands, Joe Jackson. You might know him from his video breakdowns on the Twitter.
Yeah, so he's going to be joining Casey in the second half to talk about Minnesota and kind of what they have done to go from the dregs of the Big Ten to all the way up to the meaty middle of the Big Ten. And they're, of course, Purdue's next opponent on Thursday night, so it should be a good conversation. I'm looking forward to listening to it. But
yeah, it's fair to mention why I wanted to have him on for Minnesota. So I remember early in the season, I saw a tweet, and he was like, I think Minnesota just might not be the worst team in the Big Ten and finish more towards the middle. And I remember this tweet because I remember I ridiculed.
I was going to say, I bet you mocked it. Yeah,
I did. I mocked it, and turns out I was wrong.
I think that might be the first time I've ever heard you say that.
It's because it's the first time I was ever wrong, Lyndon.
Oh, well, I mean, that explains it. That explains it. So, right before we started recording,
because I couldn't apologize for being wrong if I was right earlier, because that would have made me wrong.
Right.
And then that wouldn't have been the first time I was wrong.
Wow. We're on inception levels of apologies now. So before we started recording, you mentioned that over at Boiler Upload, you guys had just done an update kind of on where Zach Edey stands with with Purdue's all-time record as far as scoring, rebounds, and all the rest. And I wondered if you could give our listeners and our viewers, if you're watching us on YouTube, just an idea of where he is right now and kind of what he's on track to get as the season ends.
Travis did all the hard work for this. I'm just going to read off some charts. Purdue all-time scoring leader, Zach Edey, is 4th. Next up is Etwan Moore. Zach is at 2,091. Etwan Moore is 2,136. Then Joe Barry Carroll is 2nd, right past him at 2,175. And then the big gold popcorn in the sky is Rick Mount, 2,323 points.
Yeah.
So that, to make it more simple, Zach Edey needs to average, if he plays 9 games, 25.9 points a game. 9 would, I assume, be the fewest amount of games he can play with season Big Ten tournament. I could probably do that math.
Yes, because quick. we have 7 conference games remaining. We have 1 game guaranteed in the Big Ten tournament, of course, and then 1 game guaranteed in the NCAA tournament. So obviously you hope it's more games than that. But
it would be shocking if they get swept in both of those. So say worst case scenario, realistically, is probably like 11 games, which puts him at needing to average 21.2. Obviously, it goes down from there. If they make the national title game, he would have just had to average 14.6 points a game to be on top.
If Purdue makes the national title game, I would assume Zach Edey is averaging more than 14 a game to get there. So I think if Purdue's in that game, he's got that record.
Yeah. I mean, you got to think if he gets to the Big Ten tournament and then just into the Elite Eight, you're looking at, a 17.9 average, something like that.
Yeah.
Like, more than likely, he will be mounting Mount by the end of his career.
Phrasing is all I'll say to that. But
he's also almost the rebound leader. He is just 20 back from Joe Barry Carroll. So
oh
that
wow,
should happen this weekend.
yeah, that's a 2-game thing. I mean, he'll have that in the second game.
In all fairness, I do believe it was this Minnesota program that Zach Edey out rebounded all on his own with 20 plus rebounds to get Chick-fil-A in the not too distant past.
I think that's
So,
right.
honestly, for you gamblers out there, I think Zach Edey is a smart enough fella to know that Mackey Arena fans would certainly appreciate and show more appreciation for that record being broken than, say, the awful basketball fans in Columbus, Ohio.
True.
So perhaps he is motivated. We have seen what he can do against Minnesota for a chicken sandwich. What can
Right.
you do for your legacy?
For a record, a legacy. Yeah, legacy. Yeah. So obviously just, I mean, an incredible achievement to be at the top of both of those lists. I mean, points and rebounds. And before anybody gets at us in the comments or in the mentions, it should be noted that Rick Mount did this in 3 seasons. Freshmen were not eligible when he was at Purdue. And also, he did this without the 3-point line, even though he shot many shots were where the 3-point line would have been. Somebody went back years ago. I saw an analysis of how many additional points he would have had. I mean, it was just crazy.
Fictional points. I like it.
Yeah. So obviously it's a different sport. It's a different situation for Zach Edey. But when you're looking at a number and when you're looking at a record that is just a number, you have to take into account that, hey, he's going to play more games. The game is going to change. The number's the number. All Zach Edey has to do is beat the number. It doesn't take away from anything that Rick Mount did, because that's obviously an incredible achievement. It stood for so long. But it does sure look like Zach Edey's going to be king of the hill at the end of the year.
Yeah, because I mean, you can go a lot of ways. You're like, well, Zach Edey barely played his freshman year. He was off the bench his first 2 seasons. He had only played basketball for 5 years. God forbid if he played. Do you know how many points he would score in a 2-point league? A lot, like more.
Probably everything he's got -3. We know for sure.
Ooh, well, -1 Ledman, because it would still be worth 2.
Oh, well, yeah, I guess that's fair. I was thinking he wouldn't have even, yeah. Whew, telling you folks,
You were
it's
on
been a
it today,
day here in the household. Yeah. So he's obviously Big Ten Player of the Week. He's won it more than any other player, tied with Evan Turner. He's just got one more to be the player who's received the most Big Ten Players of the Week of all time. And he's obviously the Big Ten Player of the Year last year, reigning National Player of the Year. Looks like he's going to win both of those awards again. I can't imagine at this point that that's not going to happen. Puts him in rarefied air for anyone in the history of college basketball. So is he the best player to ever play at Purdue?
Ledman. Yes.
You're going yes. Okay.
There's going to be a lot of big dog hate, and I get that. I think. I don't know. I feel like it's a 2-person Mount Rushmore. And it's Edey and it's Glenn Robinson. And Edey is the way he's been able to dominate in a. It's interesting. Both of them would have a better career, I think, if you flip them around. If Glenn Robinson got to play today
now,
and Zach Edey got to play then.
There's definitely something to that. I mean, but you wonder. No, I think that's probably fair, because just the way the game was played back when Glenn played in the 90s was much more dominated by centers. He would shoot
45 free throws a game.
Yeah. Although, I mean, it was pretty physical back then as well. So you wonder if he would have held up those first 2 years before he got stronger and before his, stamina increased. You kind of, it's like a Jordan rule situation where Jordan was struggled until he got bigger and stronger and could deal with those fouls.
Yeah, I think Zach Edey has certainly done enough. I'll say this. If Zach Edey brings Purdue to a Final Four, Zach Edey gets the #1 spot.
I think that's fair.
You don't
Because
love to do it that way, but like
no,
when you're talking tournament, when you're talking Purdue and the legacy in general, like that
yeah,
means more.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, Glenn Robinson probably takes Purdue to a Final Four if he did not hurt his back in the
Mm.
Sweet 16. But it's it's a crapshoot in the tournament regardless. So to be able to do that and get Purdue to a Final Four, a thing that they've wanted for so long, it has to mean something because ultimately that's why you play the game. You play the game to get further than anybody ever has. You play the game to win the championship. And if you're a guy that leads Purdue to their first Final Four since 1980, that's got to count for something. But I will say in Glenn Robinson's favor, did you ever see him play like live and in person?
No, not in person.
I did, and he is the most dominant player I've ever
Mm.
seen play in college basketball. Um, and Evan Turner is up there as well. Evan Turner was absolutely incredible his final
Yep.
season. I mean, he was one of just blew everybody away
Mm.
every time he stepped on that court. But Zach Edey, I mean, is right up there too. But the reason I think it's so difficult is because he plays such a different position. You know, when you think of most dominant players in college basketball, it's almost always a guard
Right.
because college basketball is dominated by guards. It has been for decades. And it's very difficult to get this kind of attention and this kind of production from a big man in this day and age.
Yeah, I think that's why it stands out. And I think the two things Glenn Robinson and Zach Edey do more than most of the greats in Purdue time is they just kind of wreck the game. It's just an altered court. It's an altered form of basketball when they're on there. Like Glenn Robinson was just so physically imposing, and Zach
Yeah.
Edey is in his own way. And it's just like Carson Edwards had that a little bit with the way he shot and
Mm-hmm.
from where he could. Um, but of course, he was never nearly as consistent. Just night in, night out dominance between Glenn
Yeah.
Robinson and Zach Edey. I think. I mean, I don't know how fun a debate it is, but like it makes like all time teams all of a sudden Purdue's is looking like
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the
pretty up
best out
there.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because Zach Edey is. I think the most important part about this conversation question is just to admit that like, and there are a lot of like people that know ball, like athletes and like other basketball players. They kind of say that like he's generational. And I think we throw that term around a little too much, but like literally Zach Edey is someone that in 30 years people will be talking about, and it probably like it'll be revenant and it'll be earned. And it's weird to know that you're kind of going through that at this time.
Yeah.
You kind of know a lot of times, but I'm not sure you always know quite as much. Like I don't think we fully measured like Carson Edwards' run at the time, just because it happened so quick and then it's over.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah.
then he's in the NBA and like you never hear from him again hardly.
Right.
And Zach Edey, I don't think his career will go that way. I think he'll have some NBA shine. Nothing crazy, but like I think he'll be a productive professional player. But like that never measures up to being one of the all-time greats in college that you get to
Yeah.
watch as it's happening.
Yeah. It reminds me of that line from The Office of like the last season where Andy Bernard, Ed Helms plays, says, "I wish there was a way to know you're in the good times before
Mm,
they're gone."
I like that.
And that's really what it seems like with Zach Edey. He's not, I mean, Purdue fans appreciate him, I think, uh, in a, we understand what we have in front of us, but I don't think the greater college basketball world does. And when he is gone, someone is going to have to step in and fill that void, not only on a national perspective as a dominant player, but also from a Purdue perspective. No one player is going to be able to fill that void that he left because, as you said, it is generational.
It is.
How do you replace his production? How do you replace his consistency? And I don't know that you do. Purdue is going to look like a completely different team in a lot of ways next year because they're without their anchor. And it just shows you how important he is to the team that the entire offense is probably going to change.
And it's kind of what makes like following Purdue, writing about Purdue, telling Purdue's basketball stories so fascinating. And just being a fan and like dealing with the emotional wreckage that is attached to. It's kind of the same thing as the Matt Painter conversation, that these guys are so good and it. And the results have just always been tied to this disappointment.
Yeah.
So for every measure of greatness you give Zach Edey, for every recognition of that, it's almost like, well, God, what do we have to show for it?
Yeah.
And right now, those numbers don't like equal out because they just lost to a number 1 seed last year. And that was the beginning of the Zach Edey greatness story.
Number 16 seed.
Number 16 seed. They lost as a number 1 seed.
There you go. Yeah.
So like it just makes everything so heavy and like so hard to contemplate because you can't write your way away from it when you're telling a story. You can't.
Mm-hmm.
You can almost at times it's hard to see the game without seeing like the end point, and you're just like,
Yeah.
if we could just clean all that up by one Final Four trip, just
Yeah.
for once, not have an asterisk of, oh, yeah, he was really great, but you know how his career ended.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like
It makes everything heavy. It makes everything a slog. It as you said, it taints it, it tarnishes it, because to be able to have a player like Zach Edey, as you said, generational talent, going to most likely be back-to-back National Player of the Year, and sure, will have likely won the Big Ten, twice with him, the Big Ten tournament. Who knows what'll happen in there? But to not be able to say he got Purdue to a Final Four, or he got Purdue to the championship game, or he got Purdue to a national title would be really tough. And that's not a slight on him. It's a slight on, I think, the random nature of the tournament itself.
Yeah.
Because the best teams don't always win. The best players don't always advance. The best players don't have multiple championship rings all the time. And that, I think, is due to the random chaotic nature of March Madness. And it's one reason we love the sport, and it's another reason we hate the sport, because you miss out on moments because of a fluke. And I think that's what happened last year. I want to believe it's a fluke. And I think Zach Edey and the rest of the squad are going to show that it was. And they're going to prove that Purdue is not a joke, that Purdue belongs in the top seeds. Purdue belongs at in the conversation for the best team in the nation. And they're going to do everything they can to get Purdue to that Final Four, to that national title game, and God forbid, to that championship.
Which is why I think when you answer the question, who's the greatest spoiler of all time, it'll be whoever alleviates that.
Yeah, true.
Whoever takes that away. Like
it's an incomplete right now. We'll see where we get. But I think that's a perfect place to leave it. And we're going to take a break. When we come back, Casey is going to interview Joe Jackson about Minnesota Golden Gophers.
As you guys know by now, we've partnered with BetMGM this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for the listeners and the viewers of the Field of 68 as we all get ready for the best month of the year, March Madness. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, you can use the bonus code FIELD150 and you will get $150 in free bets on your first wager with BetMGM, regardless of whether or not you win that first bet. Here's the best part. All you need to do is deposit and bet $5 of your hard-earned money. This is how you make it work. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using the bonus code FIELD150. That's FIELD150. Deposit at least $5 and place your first wager on any game. You will receive up to $150 in bonus bets regardless of the outcome of your bet. Just make sure you use that bonus code FIELD150 when you sign up. And remember, BetMGM is now available in one wallet in select states. As a New Jersey resident, this is super convenient when I have to go cover games in Philly or New York, which happens quite a bit. When you cross state borders, you just log into your existing account and fire away. You don't have to create a new account in each state. It's easy, it's simple, and it's clean. And most importantly, we have some fun stuff coming up for the conference tournaments and for the NCAA tournament. Bet insurance tokens, college hoops odds boost, and my personal favorite, a nice little parlay boost here and there. So download the BetMGM app and sign up today. Big news, guys. I am thrilled to announce that we have partnered with Autograph, a company founded by the GOAT himself, Tom Brady. The Autograph Fandom app gives you access to the best college hoops content, fan contests, and exclusive rewards like discounted tickets, all for doing the things that diehard fans like you already do, following your favorite team in the news and listening to podcasts just like this one. When Tom, and yes, I am calling him Tom, we're on a first name basis these days, co-founded Autograph, he had one mission in mind: change the fan experience for the better. It works like this: you get all of your college hoops content you want in one place. You get articles from your favorite writers, pods from your favorite hosts, contests from your favorite creators, all on the feeds and the sites that you already enjoy. But instead of having to go to all these different places, it all comes to you in one spot, the Autograph Fandom app. But here's the best part: the more content that you consume, the higher you rank in the app. As you consider to level up in status on the app, you can unlock unique rewards curated exclusively for you. So download the free Autograph app in the App Store and use the referral code F68, that's F68, or tap in at the link in the description below or in the podcast app of your choosing to start earning points for doing something as normal as listening to this very podcast.
You good to go?
Yep, let's do it.
All right. And welcome back. Obviously, this is no longer Ledman next to me. Excited to have Joe Jackson of Boilers in the stands. Joe, how's your morning going?
It's been good. Excited to hop on here, talk some Purdue, talk some Minnesota. Appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. Elite background work there. Much improved from what Ledman had.
Appreciate that. Yeah, this was a addition maybe a few weeks ago at this point, but I like it. It kind of fits well. So yeah, it works.
Yeah, it looks like old school logos. Where a lot of those. Yeah.
Some of them are, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're here a lot, so I can kind of apologize to you publicly. It was a few months ago, I think, before conference started, and you're like, I don't, on Twitter, you were like, I think it's possible Minnesota's not terrible. And I remember ridiculing that. Turns out not terrible.
Yeah.
Purdue obviously will host them this week. If you look at the Big Ten Conference, Purdue's up top 11-2. Minnesota dead in the middle, 6-6 so far. I think my first question is just, obviously you're familiar with the Big Ten as a whole. You do a whole bunch of work, great video recaps. How has Ben Johnson turned this around for Minnesota?
It's they're starting to get an identity, and that was because like preseason I had them last. I had Penn State above them, and the big reason was just like I was like, I trust Penn State finding an identity more than Minnesota. I didn't, they had Elijah Hawkins come in as a transfer, Mike Mitchell come as his transfer, and those were both of them took big jumps from. Elijah Hawkins came from Howard. Mike Mitchell was I don't know if he was backup or he didn't play like the most minutes at Pepperdine. And so I was like, I just don't see how they're going to make that jump. Turns out they did. And so now Ben Johnson has the ability to, they're going to try to slow the game up a little bit, let Elijah Hawkins just run pick and roll after pick and roll. And now there's some shooters surrounding him, whether it be Cam Christie or Mike Mitchell. Dawson Garcia isn't a great shooter per se, but he's one of the better scorers in the Big Ten. Pharrell Payne has taken a jump. It's just, you've seen these players take jumps, and then Ben Johnson's trusted them. And I think also Ben Johnson himself, for the most part, has improved as a coach, especially from early on in the season. Even like you look at the Missouri game, San Francisco's, it's whatever loss, but like some of these games early on, it was same old Minnesota as last year of just not being able to get it done. And I think for a large chunk of the Big Ten season, Ben Johnson's made good adjustments in the second half, just kind of figuring out what needs to happen. It's not like they're like, a top tier team, but at the same time, going from dead last to whatever middle of the pack, wherever they end up, like that's a huge jump for them.
Yeah, because last season, I believe they lost 12 straight at one point in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
And that was a team that like had a couple good players. Like Talon Cooper was good. Jameson Battle was good. They both left to go play elsewhere. So to lose those guys and get better does speak to, I think, Ben Johnson's job for sure. One of the things that stands out when I look at them is they are the second best team when it comes to assist to field goal made. Is that Is that the players or is that stuff that Ben Johnson's running this season that's really working?
I would say a mix.
Mhm.
I think Ben Johnson's done a good job of putting his players in the right spot. A lot of that is those assists come from Elijah Hawkins, who's, I don't know exactly where he stands compared to Braden right now. I know they're like neck and neck for assists per game, as two of the top in the entire country. I know Elijah Hawkins at one point was leading the country. I don't know exactly if that's still there or not, but either way,
7.6 right now.
7.6. So he's way up there, and that's a lot. And it's that combined with they do a good job of he does a much better job this year of getting guys in good spots, whether it be, Garcia in the high post or Cam Christie can really space the floor and knock down shots when it does come to a kick out. I think there's just more guys quite literally just being able to make shots, which helps. And then you get that combined with you're getting really good Elijah Hawkins this year. My concern with him coming in was that last year against some of the high major games that he played, he'd have 8 assists, but he'd also have 8 or 9 turnovers. That the turnover problem really hasn't been too much of an issue this year, while the assists have still been there, and it's given Minnesota more of just the capability to actually flow into offense and not just like try to hammer out something. And instead, it's a little bit more flow, a little bit more being able to actually kind of read and react and get good looks.
Yeah, Elijah Hawkins' assist rate is 40.6%, which is 5th highest in the country. 39.9 in conference play, which is the highest in the conference. He does turn the ball over once every about 4 possessions, but I at some point when you're a team that lacks playmaking or scoring around, it's just worth it to have a guy that can, even if it does come with a bunch of turnovers here and there.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So obviously you're familiar with everyone in the Big Ten, but you're at all the Purdue games, certainly the home games. What is there an area that you see that Minnesota can attack Purdue?
I would say I'll be interested to see how much Minnesota goes to Garcia at the 5. And if that happens, Garcia is going to try to draw out Edey. Now, Garcia isn't a great shooter, 28.6% on the year. And so it might just turn into Painter letting Garcia shoot, or maybe not letting, but sort of just like not giving him the full respect as a shooter and keeping Edey down low. I would say that's one way. They're going to throw, they have a couple big bodies, Minnesota in Payne, and Jack Wilson doesn't really play, but he's like a 6'11", 290-pound dude who played offensive lineman for 5 years of college. I
sounds like a useful skill.
Yeah. I joked coming into the year that like they brought Jack Wilson in purely for this game just to like have a body to throw against Edey. So they'll be able to go big there and use some fouls. But I think Garcia at the 5, and then Purdue's pick and roll defense has been much improved this year. It's still going to be a way of they're going to try to get Elijah Hawkins downhill and space it out to Christie or whoever. Christie's the main one. Mike Mitchell will shoot the ball well too. Those would be the 2 ways. It would be Garcia at the 5, just spacing the floor, and then also just letting Elijah Hawkins run pick and roll. Those would be the two areas that I'll at least be focused on in the game.
Yeah, my mind is flashback to a couple plays against Wisconsin when they ran just a little pick and roll with Kral slipping. And I think he got 2 dunks out of it where he just got untouched. I was a little surprised they didn't go to it more. And Kral's a little bit, Wall, not Kral, sorry.
Yeah.
And Wall is a little undersized compared to Kral. And I think the speed Edey has a hard time checking, which you kind of need with the way they play. You have to at least slow it down a little. And Dawson Garcia seems like a type that could potentially get to Purdue that way, especially with an elite playmaker like Hawkins. I think that's something to look to now and forward. Is that kind of your concern with this Purdue team in, the big picture tournament time when it gets to elite play?
Yeah, I mean, I think the defense has been very good for Purdue, but there's still ways to beat them. And if you're going to do it, that's got to be kind of the way to do it. It's going to be, you just at some point have to draw Edey out and make him uncomfortable. And then because he's so, I've made the argument, I think you can make very clear arguments that Edey's not the best defender in the country. I would still argue he's the most important defender. I think, you look at this roster, and Lance Jones, very, very good defender from the starting 5. Smith, Lawyer, even TKR. some of them are, they're
Yeah.
okay at best, probably
Right.
defensively, but Edey makes up for everything. And so you just stay within system, you force the ball to Edey and let him, be 7-4 down low.
Mhm.
Teams that can space him out a bit, teams that can be quick, like Wall, even though Edey wasn't respecting Wall as a shooter, he's just so quick, is able to, use his footwork to get down low. I think those types of teams will be the ones, at least to give problems to Purdue's defense. But also if they go small, it's, now they have to figure out how to defend 7-4 Zach Edey. And this year, especially, Purdue has shooters everywhere around him, so it's not like last year you can just, really just hope that Purdue misses threes. This year, Purdue's probably going to make threes.
Yeah. And I know that's smart because that's what Matt Painter has said pretty much all season. It makes a big difference to shoot about 32% last year from three compared to 40 this year.
Yeah. Huge.
Yeah. So I'm curious about your we talked about this in the early part of the video of where Zach Edey just lands in the all-time for Purdue players. Personally, do you have a feel for where you'd rank him on that list?
So I'll give it a little context. I'm I went to Purdue. My freshman year was 2018-19, that Elite Eight run. So
Gotcha.
I was not a Purdue fan before then. That was my first year of Purdue fandom. Which, by the way, what a year to start as Purdue fandom, and full experience of like, oh wow, this team's good, and then it's just heart ripping out.
Yeah.
For me, like, I know Big Dog and Rick Mountain and all them, like, they're obviously elites and very easily can make the case for him, and I don't think anybody will argue. But for me, like, especially if Purdue goes on a run, I don't see how Edey could not be the best of all time. I think, especially if Purdue goes on a run, whether it be Final Four or even a championship or whatever, like, for me, he'd probably be the greatest of all time.
Yeah, that's pretty much where we ended up too. Like, it's him and Glenn Robinson in some conversation. Rick Mount's probably a little bit of a third just because reasons. Just like there's just not been that many game breakers on a physicality, on a relentlessness scale compared to those two.
Yeah.
Let's talk just a little bit about what you guys are doing over at Boilers and Stands. Did I get that right? Yeah. Boilers.
Yeah.
The double plural always throws me off just a little bit. But what are you guys doing over there? Obviously, you guys have been hustling this year.
Yeah. So we do live recap shows, post-game shows, pretty much right after the final buzzer on home. For Purdue home games, it's like 10 minutes after. Away games, pretty much right after. So yeah, just live post-game shows, me, Craig Bowers, Greg Braggs, just talking through pretty much whatever the game's going on. We also post stuff on Twitter at Boilers and Stands. So that's a lot. We have some interviews and stuff too. We just had an interview with the Boilermaker Alliance CEO. So that was a pretty interesting one for anybody that does want to listen. Just, I didn't, because I don't know really what's going on with NIL and all that. So good insight there. But yeah, that's what we're doing over there.
And then what about you yourself? Where can people find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Joe Jackson CBB. Then on YouTube, I'm at Feed the Post, and so I do just a lot of Big Ten film breakdowns, just going through some of the X's and O's and try to piece together why some things happen. So those are the two places you can find me.
Yeah, it's an absolute follow for anyone interested in the Big Ten. Purdue, obviously, as well. Final little prediction: you think Purdue is going to win the Big Ten this year?
I would say so. I don't think my confidence ever really wavered. I wasn't expecting Wisconsin to go on a 4-game losing streak, but I did think Wisconsin was being a bit overrated. And then, Purdue's, I still think Purdue's going to drop one of these games randomly. It's just, how the Big Ten works. But even then, I just, Illinois is also probably going to drop one more randomly. And at that point, Purdue just takes care of business. I would expect them to win it by 2 or 3, probably.
Yeah, beginning of the year, I think I had them at 4 games. I don't think that's out of the realm. It's probably more likely 3 or 2. We've got a little finish of Michigan State at home, Illinois on the road, Wisconsin at home. In my eyes, obviously the road game's tougher.
Yeah,
but it just seems like Michigan State and Wisconsin are not well suited to play Purdue. Is that something that you agree with?
Yeah. I mean, I even talking with Craig, like it was, I don't know why I brought it up, but it was like a week and a half before the at Wisconsin game. And I was just like, Wisconsin just doesn't worry me for Purdue. They just don't match up. And then Michigan State, we saw what Edey did to Michigan State last year. Their big room hasn't really improved much. So you see that. I don't think it'll happen because it's the Big Ten and just close games happen all the time. I wouldn't be absolutely shocked though. There's there's 7 games left for Purdue. I wouldn't be like completely shocked if the only game that's decided by single digits is at Illinois. Purdue, these next 4 are all very, very winnable games. I don't like how Michigan State, Wisconsin match up with Purdue, especially at Mackey Arena, and then at Illinois should be, that one should be a good one.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. The only thing worrying is that means it's like a 15-game win streak to finish the season, and you don't see those very often.
Yeah.
But Joe, we appreciate it. The insights are always great as always, and appreciate you coming on one more time where everyone can find you.
Yeah, at Joe Jackson CBB on Twitter, and then feed the post on YouTube. Yeah, appreciate you having me on. I always enjoy talking hoops.
All right, that's it for the Old Gold Show. Remember to like, rate, subscribe, comment, do all that fun stuff.